Okay, so today on the bench we have a President HR2600. Actually, a customer sent in two of these. Reach over here, grab the other one. He actually sent in a 2600 and a 2510. So almost twin brothers, or it's brother and sister, I guess you could say. This one was pretty much in, I guess, about as close to unused condition as you could get. I think he said he bought this one brand new. So he's owned this one, its entire life. This one I think he said he got used. Has a couple of them. And hasn't really used this one that much. Wanted to, get alignments done on them and anything that needs to be done to them. Now, the first thing you should do on either of these style of radios, any of the, it could be a President Lincoln, 2600, 2510s, it can be one of the realistic HTX 100s, any radio of this format and layout. It has a CPU board on the underside here. One of the most important things you should do, and normally you'll hear me say replace electrolytic capacitors. Yes, that's important in doing that in a radio like this, because they are at pretty much the end of their lifespan, but that's not the most important thing. If you own one of these, and you don't need any, well, you may, depending on how bad it is actually, but you may not need any electronics tools. Really all you may need is a pair of tweezers, dental pick, something like that, is to remove the glue out of these things. It has gotten to the point in age in these radios, any of them. I don't care whose name's on the front, what the model number is. They all have the same problem: corrosive glue. I think they call it bond seal in these. Actually, I think it even says in the in the service manual, to tell you the truth. Let's see here. This is actually the manual for the 2510. Bond block is what they call it. You can see where they tell you, but that's exactly it. These three transformers, you can see they even have them listed. Actually, they have four of them listed, but 124, 34, 35, 36. So all of those transformers have this blasted, now what they call bond block. You often hear me call it Sony bond. Now, this is a different style of compound. Now, those of you familiar with it in like CB radios, that usually started out, I don't want to say it's transparent, but it's kind of translucent. Is a kind of a clearish yellow, and it gets darker brown over the decades, dries out, eventually turns dark brown, becomes conductive and corrosive. Now, the stuff that they used in this starts out opaque, and it was kind of a cream color. And over the decades, it does the same stuff, same exact thing the Sony bond does. It gets darker in color, eventually becomes conductive and extremely corrosive. And now the conductive part is bad in itself. Usually it'll cause problems, but it doesn't really cause parts failures. Once you remove it, the short is gone, radio starts working again. The problem is the corrosive part, and that's what absolutely kills these radios. And where you will find it. Now, there's a couple places on the other side of the board, depending on which model you have, but the place to look for this if you're having transmit power problems. Now, if you've actually owned the radio for a long time. So in the case of like this radio here, this would be a good example. Now, the customer never really used this one. He has a couple of them been using other radios. But, if he had been using this one, I suspect the glue would have been a lot worse. Now, the glue in this one had gotten bad. It had actually done damage, and I had to do repairs. And what it does, where they put it, is actually where you will now see there's hot glue. Hot glue's non-conductive. It's the proper thing to use nowadays, I guess you could say. So when you remove the glue, you want to put something back in here to try, especially if these radios are going to be used mobile, to keep these ferrite cores from bouncing around. But they pour it around these two toroidal transformers. They pour it around this toroidal transformer and this little teeny tiny guy right down here. Now, very frequently in radios like this one over here in this 2510, where it actually had damage, this one was damaged. This one had a little bit of corrosion on it, but it could be cleaned off, and it was, it wasn't that bad. It got caught in time. But this one over here, yeah, it was just shot. Actually, this one also needed a final. Actually, there's the one that was replaced in it. And that's another thing. The customer said he had sent it to somebody, and somebody in the ham club, I guess said they could work on it. And he said he thinks the only thing they really did, other than supposedly, and I'm not sure if that guy was supposed to have stuck the final in, but someone supposedly had done a high power modification to this radio. Well, I'm here to tell you that's a factory. Now, it may not be the original transistor to this radio, but that's what's supposed to be in here is an MRF 477. It's not a high power modification. That's what these radios came with from the factory. Now this one is just bad. It's completely shot. When I first turned this one on after I got finished with the glue problems and recapping it, it had a couple milliwatts of power, and that was basically just driver power leaching through the final section. But so the main places you want to look on this side of the board are around these two transformers. You'll find it just like my hot glue that I've installed here. You're going to find it down. It's oozed down and it's touching the leads of these enamel coated wires. It's magnet wire where it goes through the board. Well, of course you have to solder that, so you have to take the enamel off of that wiring, and there's usually going to be some of that exposed wire up top. Now the glue, if it's just touching the enamel part, usually doesn't do any damage. I say usually because actually on these tiny wires I've actually seen it eat through the entire wires up on the top side. But yeah, where it's actually exposed, where the enamel has been removed so it could be tinned and then soldered to the board, it just eats the leads right off. You'll also find this pre-driver transistor. That was pretty much shorted out in this radio. It just dark brown goop on there, all corroded up. In this one I also had to replace a small ceramic capacitor and this resistor in the back, because both of these radios are very, very similar. They're not exactly the same, but they're very close to being the same. There are a few components in this one that aren't in this one, and vice versa. There are some differences. The biggest differences are in the CPU board. But yeah, so if you own these, the best thing you can do for yourself, even if you don't change the electrolytic capacitors, remove the glue. If it's a radio you're going to use a lot, you definitely want to remove the glue, because this radio is a good example. This radio had never really been used, so it never got hot. If this radio had been used a lot, or in a vehicle where it was exposed to baking in the sun all day inside of a vehicle, you'll find that radios that are used, the glue's a lot worse, like in the case of this one, than it is in a radio like this one where it wasn't used. Usually the glue in a radio like this, you can do just what I did. You can flake that glue out, clean it off really good, just put down some modern adhesive that's not going to deteriorate in a few decades like the original glue they used in these things. Like I say, I prefer hot glue, but you got to get it out before it goes bad. Radios like this one's, I'm not going to say it's had a hard life, I don't know, because it's in good physical condition, but it had been used, and had been used a lot, and the glue on there was just horrible. You could see it was just dark brown, especially the one place you'll really notice. Actually, let me just turn it off, we'll get her unhooked here. Come on there, accessory plug. This stiff piece of LMR 400 out of the way. We'll slide this one over so we can flip the cover over on this one. And the other places you'll find it. Now, again, the two radios are slightly different. On the 2510s, like the one over there, you'll find there's a little circuit board here. You'll find usually a brown color. That can vary because I have seen some differences, but it's usually a little brown wire runs on the underside of the board here. Over here, you'll find a resistor and a transistor. There'll be a blob of glue on that, and like 3 dots of glue across here to hold that wire so it can't flop around. Remove the glue. Same thing. When it starts to become conductive, it's going to short out all of the circuit pads that it's touching. The other places you'll find it are up here. You'll find some poured between these two electrolytic capacitors. Usually the only thing it's going to damage there at the most, usually, as long as it hasn't oozed over and touched this chip resistor right here, is it'll just, if anything, corrode the leads of the cap and it might short it out. But you'll also find it right here and here. Now this is not the original glue. Like I say, that's like a Sony bond type glue. They call it bond lock. But it does the same thing. You'll see, and especially in these two places, it will be dark brown. And the reason it's dark brown, both of these are voltage regulators. And they get now they're not being used really hard, so they don't get extremely hot, but they still do get hot. And they pour it right on the tabs, on the heatsink tabs on them. And yeah, it bakes and cooks, and like I say, it'll start to corrode stuff, anything that it's touching. Now, what I use to put these back down, I don't use hot glue on these. I use a thermal adhesive or a thermal glue. So it's meant for like gluing. Well, let's say this IC is a good example. If it didn't have this little ceramic capacitor bodged across the top, and you wanted to add a heat sink to this, you would use something like this. It's called thermal adhesive. You'd put a little bit of thermal adhesive on there, and then you could just glue a heat sink right onto the top of the IC. But that's what I actually use, and the reason I do that is that way it actually, because the thermal glue is meant to do just that. It's thermally conductive, so it can transfer any of the heat that comes off of these two voltage regulators, can transfer it down to the circuit board a little bit more efficiently than that bond lock that they used, and to help to dissipate the heat. Keeps them from getting hot, and actually by warming the board a little bit more better, because you have a little bit better thermal conductivity here, it'll stabilize the temperatures in this entire CPU board here. So it'll warm up faster, get to that temperature, and stay there. So you don't have as long to wait for any frequency variations that you have as a board warms up. Because you have to remember, this is no different than a CB radio. There's no crystal ovens in here. The crystals are just floating up here on the board. So they're very susceptible to changes in temperature. So the faster you can get those warmed up, the faster your frequencies are going to stabilize. But yeah, so just I wanted to do a quickie video. I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again. That's the most important thing you can do. Get that glue out of this radio. Here, you'll find some of it here. If it's a 2510 you're working on, you'll usually find 3 dots of that stuff going across here, and another blob over here at the resistor and transistor. On the top side of the radio, you're going to find it on all 4 of the toroidal transformers back here, and it usually has oozed over and touched other components. Now, usually here, the only thing it'll damage is the wire, the actual coils. Here, it can ooze out onto these capacitors, resistors. Same thing over here. A lot of times it'll take out a resistor and a capacitor, and a lot of times this pre-driver transistor. You'll also find it down the side of this 455 filter, and also where this crystal filter here is glued to the top of this IC. This is your FM board. Make sure you get that taken off. Now it's not so important that you get it off of the case. Yes, it will corrode this crystal filter can slightly, but it's just a can. It's not going to really affect anything. Yeah, maybe 100, 150, 200 years from now, it might eventually eat a hole through it, but trust me, it's not going to happen in your lifetime. The biggest problem is if any of it has oozed onto the IC pins. And actually, I don't think it was this one. I think it was the 2510. Now, when I recap these, I pull these, actually remove these 2 circuit boards. There's two notches in the main board here, and then they push down through, and then they're edge solder connections onto the main board. So I actually removed both of these because, of course, you can see there's an electrolytic cap there, and there's 3 of them on this board here. So I pull them out. A lot of times you'll find that glue, when they poured it onto this, in this area right here, it has oozed on to the pins of this IC. Make sure you get it off of there and get it cleaned off really well. Other common places is, of course, big electrolytic capacitors. So in the power supply section, there's usually going to be a blob of it down at the bottom of this cap, and this cap. Again, it really doesn't usually hurt anything here. I mean, if any of it got underneath of the cap, it'll eat the leads off of the capacitor. But odds are you're probably going to be replacing your caps anyhow, because they're going bad just from age. So there you go. There's just a quickie maintenance tip to do on the President Uniden style 10-meter radios, common failure point, and you'll see that in so many radios. And it's a good indicator if your output power, because it doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen overnight. You won't have fantastic output power one day and it's just dead the next. If something like that happened, you probably have another problem other than glue. But if your power has slowly over time been getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and it's getting to the point where you're really starting to notice it, you're like, man, this radio just does not have the output power that it used to. Removing that glue a lot, because I've actually had radios in where these two transformers, because you have to remember, again, exposed wires for those transformers, you got a lot of, all your RF power is right here, your output power. And those pins will short together, and because remember, the glue becomes, it's not just corrosive, it's conductive. Well, it's a resistor, and then as it gets darker brown and more conductive, the resistance just keeps getting lower and lower and lower, and eventually it shorts out these coils, and if it's touching any other components, it could be a straight path to ground. So instead of the power getting over to your antenna jack, it never makes it out of the final past these toroidal transformers right here. It'll get about this far, and that's the end of it. Or same thing over here. You won't get any farther than out of this, because this is the coupling transformer. This little small one here is the coupling transformer between your pre-driver and your final. This one is the coupling transformer between your driver and your final, and then these are the output coupling transformers. But yeah, so if any of those short out, your RF power can get shunted straight to ground, or like I say, it can go through the glue over to another component where you don't want RF energy. So, but yeah, common problem, and I've actually seen that. A radio that had almost no output power, just remove the glue, power came back. So if it's a gradual thing, it's happening over time. A lot of people think, well, my transistor's going bad. It's slowly going bad. Honestly, finals, drivers, actually most transistors, don't get me wrong, you can hurt them and their output power will drop, but usually when a transistor goes, it's working 1 minute and it doesn't the next. You've done something horrible to it, or it just failed due to age, there's a lot of heat cycling, but usually they just fail. You won't, over a period of years, just see the power drop. It's, like I say, that's a good indication that you're having conductive glue problems in here. So, get your covers off and check your radios, and if you have any of that blasted goopy snot in here, get it the heck out of your radio. Do yourself a favor, and save your radio before it gets eaten from the inside out.